Incidentally, I was chairing the Arab group in New York in March of 2002, and within, I think, 48 hours of the issuance of the Arab Peace Initiative, we had the passage of Resolution 1397 in the Security Council, which was presented by the United States and first mentioned the vision of two states living side by side in peace and security. And so we believe there's a sort of intimate connection between that vision and then what the Arab world has offered Israel. I think it's rather regrettable that at the birth of the initiative, we had a series of events occurring in Israel and then within the occupied territories that made it difficult for us to communicate the contents of the plan. But I think the gesture was there, and one only wonders what would have happened had the Israeli government of the time returned to us with some questions and said to us, well, what do you mean by no further claims, or what do you mean by mutual security guarantees? And I think the Arab League then would have probably set up a committee to furnish some answers and make it clear to the Israelis what we mean by this. Unfortunately, there was no such sort of dialogue that could be embroidered into something, and so we, I think, stand to be told that we could have done better, and I think there's a general appreciation we could have. However, having said that, no Arab state has withdrawn from the promotion of the initiative, and I think that must be appreciated. And so we hope that at some stage, again, it's not too late, that the Israeli public, by and large, will appreciate the contents of it. One hears from speaking to various Israelis that the public in Israel is so blinded by the reference to 194, where the refugees are concerned, that they miss the fact that the words agreed to are in the text. And of course, in the final analysis, when you look at the final status talks, or the talks to be held on final status issues, proximity or otherwise, whatever comes out of the discussions has to be survivable, both in Israel and in Palestine. There's this belief, I think, that people have, that if Israel was left alone with the Palestinians, and you had the US and you had the Europeans and you had the Quartet and you had all of us there, that somehow we would bludgeon Israel into accepting positions it couldn't accept. Or conversely, if the Palestinians were left alone with just the US and the Israelis, that they would be beaten into accepting positions they simply couldn't accept. In actual fact, it can't be either, because the product of negotiations must either win passage in the Knesset or a referendum in Israel, and likewise in Palestine. And so you have to come up with a win-win for both sides. And it's not impossible to do that. And we clearly hope that it's something that can happen. And then, of course, we embroider the Arab Peace Initiative into the larger tapestry and see peace between all 22 Arab states and Israel.
I have three questions that touch on nuclear issues. Can you comment on Jordan's assessments of the role of nuclear power in its future economic development, including desalination of water, and address the implications of the scenario of Israel attacking Iran over the nuclear issue? What are the implications for Jordan and the broader region from your perspective?
Listening to your first question, I strongly suspect it came from one of my staff at the embassy. Yeah. So I will deal with them later. No, as many of you know, Jordan is very heavily dependent on the import of petroleum products for it to meet its security, or let's say its energy security. 96% of our energy is in the form of petroleum products imported from the outside. And at the same time, we have discovered recently that we have about 118,000 tons of recoverable uranium in Jordan, so 2% of perhaps the world's uranium reserves. So it only stands to make sense that as a country with no oil, effectively, and yet the availability of uranium, that we need to establish some sort of energy policy that builds on this as well as other renewable energy. In 2007, in terms of our usage per capita, I think it was 4,700 megawatts of electricity that we were using. This is likely to climb. This, of course, not per capita, likely to climb. And we're looking to set up 2 reactors, one sort of research reactor of about 100 megawatt standard, and the other one, a larger one, which would be up to about 1,000 megawatts, which will provide essentially 20% of our energy needs in combination with other technologies. We are in discussion with a great many countries around the international community and with the IAEA, and we're confident that this will move forward quite smoothly. Now, the second question is, I have to add, it's completely and totally unrelated to the first, so I don't want, by dint of your putting them together, that somehow people believe that they're connected. I can't speak for what the Israeli government thinks or will do. We have always supported the initiative put forward by President Mubarak of Egypt for a Middle East free of weapons, of nuclear weapons, but more particularly weapons of mass destruction. We are signatory and have acceded to all the major disarmament treaties where these weapons are concerned. Clearly, it's a region that has the potential to be very unstable, and we just don't believe that weapons should exist in this region of that sort at all. We hope that through a combination of measures that the perceived understanding on the part of many in the international community that Iran has a desire to weaponize its nuclear capabilities is something that can be dealt with through measures short of violence. We just simply, I think, can't afford to have another round of hostilities in a region that's so under stress, I think, from everything else that we have to deal with.
Okay, thank you.
You played a major role in the founding of the International Criminal Court. How would you evaluate the effectiveness of the court in its early stages, and what needs to be done to make the International Criminal Court more effective?
Yeah. You know, the 20th century saw more people lose their lives through violence than I think all previous centuries combined. And were it not for this new institution, I don't see how we can possibly imagine that the next century will not be as bloody as the past century. And when we look at the International Criminal Court, essentially what it is, it's a court of last resort. It sits in the background. And the court says to governments, you have your constitutions, you have your penal codes, and in respect of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and now the crime of aggression, which we are negotiating the definition of and the grounds for the exercise of jurisdiction, all of that you must sort of confront. If there's a national of your country who is suspected of involvement in one of these crimes, then you as a government must take measures to investigate and, if need be, prosecute. So it very much sits there as a reminder, as a permanent conscience to governments, do your job. If you do your job, then there's no need for the court to become involved. If you don't do your job, we are not going to let those who are suspected of committing massive outrages of leaving or escaping the fact that they must face trial. Now, one of the things that is not often appreciated is that You have 111 countries now that are party to the court. What does that mean? It means that 111 heads of state, heads of government, parliamentarians, members of the armed forces, that every single individual has put themselves under the jurisdiction of an international court. In other words, they have forfeited their sovereign right, their customary right to sovereign immunity. There simply is no equivalent in history where you have such a voluntary surrender of rights through such a treaty. I mean, it's a step so enlightened that it has no parallel, and it's often not remarked upon. And so I believe that it's an inexorable advance, that we will simply see it grow from strength to strength. Indeed, the argument I make with many is that you should sit with your governments and explain to them that it's better to join the court now than to wait until you're the final country, the last country, 30, 40 years from now. Because what possible advantage could be accrued from being outside the system and not assist in building it up. But it's something I think that's very necessary. We're in a period of transition. It'll take time before we fully feel the effects of what it means to have an international criminal court. But I'm very confident. And I should finally say that I have the privilege of chairing the negotiations on the crime of aggression, the supreme international crime as identified in Nuremberg. And we had our latest round last week, and I was very satisfied with the way that the international community is dealing with this issue.
Okay. What are the pros and cons of the Palestinians declaring a state at this time? Why have they not done so until now? What are the pros and cons?
It's a good question, but I think it's one that really should be directed to Ambassador Ariaqat, who is the PLO observer here in Washington. More than me, I'm not in a position to really make a qualified judgment of it. One assumes that when they believe the time is right to take a decision, they will take the decision.
What interests and responsibilities does Jordan retail in the holy places in Jerusalem?
Yes, we have long held responsibilities regarding the Waqf in the Old City, but in particular on the Haram. And this is recognized in the treaty that we also have with Israel. Whenever repairs, for instance, were needed to parts of the area adjacent to the Haram, Jordanian engineers used to be able to go and fix. There were bulges, for instance, a few years ago that we repaired. We have a presence there. As of late, though, coordination with the Israelis on these issues has proven to be quite difficult, and we're trying to resolve them both directly and by virtue of the assistance of the United States and other countries.
Could you address further the process of democratization in Jordan and the prospects for Jordanians electing their prime minister?
Yes, this is something, of course, that we've been grappling with for many years. As you know, His late Majesty King Hussein attempted in 1957 to move in that direction, but it proved itself to be premature in our judgment, because we were still a very poor country and sort of prone to outside influence, and it led directly to the enunciation of the Eisenhower Doctrine in 1957. And President Eisenhower was very firm about the interference by different countries in the internal affairs of others. Since then, we have been moving back into the direction of opening up the country to greater participation. His Majesty King Abdullah is very committed to this, and we have at the moment this plan for the decentralization of Jordan, to break it up into what you, for no other better word of it, sort of federal units, where local the local units will have their own budgets and will be directly answerable to the people in terms of the provision of services.